All right, there we go. Hello everyone, how's it going? Tim here, and this is BxJS Weekly, episode 136, bringing you all the best JavaScript news of the week in a podcast form. And yeah, today we got a pretty short one actually. There's not really that many articles or even getting started tutorials for whatever reason, but we do have quite a few pretty damn big releases this week around, so we are gonna talk about those in quite some detail. Anyway, as usual, the first section of the week is getting started. We got two articles here. The first one is building an authenticated JAMstack app with Next.js, Airtable, Tailwind CSS, and Auth0. So this is, as usual, the article from the Auth0 guys. If you ever see Auth0 anywhere, it's usually their own articles, which tend to be really good, but you know, the caveat is they add the Auth0 at the very end because, of course, they want to promote that, which I'm not saying anything, like I haven't actually tried them, so don't really have an opinion about that. But their articles tend to be really, really good on the other ends. So this one is a pretty simple app that is built with a Next.js used for front end as well as API routes with serverless functions, and then Airtable as a database for storing data and accessing it, and Auth0 for authentication, and Tailwind for some basic styling. There's also a YouTube video if you want to go through it this way. It's a nice article, as I said, pretty nice tutorial on the whole thing. If you are curious about this kind of stack, if you wanted to build something like this, do check it out. It's very extensive, very large, very detailed. Again, as I said, their articles usually tend to be pretty damn good. So if that sounds interesting, do check it out. Hey, Mr. Isabel, welcome to the stream. Hey, Manuel, welcome to the stream. All right, and the next article we got here is Understanding TypeScript Generics. So this is for all of you TypeScript fans out there, or maybe, whoever wants to learn TypeScript. Generics is one of those things that is incredibly powerful, but can be incredibly confusing at first, especially when you only, started doing the typings, and then you see this T thing and you're like, what the hell does that mean? How does this work? And how do I use it, right? I remember, I haven't learned generics in TypeScript. I think my first encounter with them was, where was it? Was it C# or something? But I was immensely confused by the whole thing. Like, what the hell is going on? Why do I need this? Why don't I just type it? Maybe it was C++. Yes, that is a good point. I don't remember, honestly, where I first encountered them, but I remember it took me like a year or something to finally figure out how the hell does it work and why do you need that. This article does a really good job of explaining what generics are, how do they work, what are the use cases, and how do you actually use them with TypeScript specifically, which is really cool. So if you're learning TypeScript and you're confused about generics, set out, I don't know, probably an hour of your time, if not more, because this article is very big and very detailed. But it does cover just about everything you want to know about generics to get started, basically. So there we go. Hey, Aaron, welcome to the stream. It's going pretty good. Hope you're doing well, too. Abziz, welcome to the stream. And PL Better, welcome to the stream. All right, this is it for the getting started section. As I said, pretty small this time around. Now we got articles and news. We got only two of them here. The first one is, well, I put it in the article, but it's more of a very short thing or sort of discussion, I guess. The article from Dr. Axel Rauschmeier titled Writing JavaScript Tools in Other Languages, a New Trend. We already discussed this, I think, last time, right? And because there was one of the new tools written, I think RSLint was covered last time, right? And this is basically the article that gathers all the current JavaScript tools built in other languages, such as ESBuild that was built in Go, SVC that is built in Rust, Google Closure Compiler, which is probably one of the oldest ones that was built in Java, and it's still, I think it's still around and kicking. Like, I don't know how I haven't used it in ages, to be honest, but I think it's still, it's still updated. 4 days ago, last commit. Seems like it's relatively well maintained. But I mean, again, this is a Google tool, so they're probably using it internally. And then there's RSLint in Rust, Flow in OCaml, which is also a relatively old project, dprint in Rust, which is used in Deno, for example. We got Fuzz Node Manager, which is something I haven't actually heard about before. We got Volta, which is the, again, node manager written in Rust. And then there is a bit of a discussion going, on what are the upside, why write JavaScript tooling in other languages, and why use JavaScript if you write everything in other languages. I think, like, as I said, last time, I think this is a really cool trend that we're getting tools for JavaScript written in other languages because, well, there's a lot of advantages to that, right? So the compiled binaries is like having one binary that does everything you want is incredibly cool, and then you can just download it and use it. And then the speed obviously is amazing thing, like, right? JavaScript is fast, like, yeah, if you compare it to, well, most of the other interpreted languages is going to be really, really fast, but it's not as fast as something like Rust, for example. It never will be. It's just not a thing, right? So you can make a build tool that's going to be like 3 times faster or maybe even more in Go or Rust and just beat JavaScript at every possible metric, essentially, right? And I do welcome changes like this, to be honest. Many languages make it easier to parallelize code. Yeah, I mean, I guess this is also the point. We only got workers in JavaScript quite recently, and they weren't. I mean, they're still not that widespread and have very limited use cases, while other languages basically have baked-in parallelization, like Golang with the CSP pattern, right? So it's like, yeah, those things can be a lot easier. Anyway, I think this is a really, really neat trend that we're seeing, and I personally welcome more tooling like this. Again, especially, stuff like ESBuild that would, like, a purely native Webpack would be a very interesting thing to see. Like, I don't know if we're going to get, like, if ESBuild will eventually evolve into something like this, or if we're going to get something different, but yes, I personally welcome this trend. And what do you guys think? Let me know what you think in chat or in comments to the video. I would be curious to hear your thoughts. Do you think that might be bad for JavaScript somehow? Like, I tried to find some negative, but I couldn't. Like, the only negative that I can see is that it might be harder for JavaScript developers to contribute back to those tools because they are not in JavaScript, and you either have to learn the other language or basically just, use it as is, which is, I guess, a bit limiting, but I wouldn't say that this is a major problem, and learning other languages can be really fun. So there we go. Let me have a look at the chat. Hey, Iron Z, everything is good. I hope you're doing good as well. Hey, Marina, welcome to the stream. Hi, Nitsan, welcome to the stream. ESBuild is amazingly fast. Okay, cool. I probably should try it at streams at some point because it seems like an incredibly helpful and nice tool. Because I only tried it a couple of times just to play around with it, but haven't actually built any real projects with it, or even the toy projects that are relatively large. So it'll be interesting to try. Anyway, next article we got here is evading defenses using VueJS script gadgets. Now this one is a bit weird. It's sort of deep dive into the vulnerabilities within Vue templating language specifically. So this deep dives into show how you can abuse Vue properties to actually execute different attacks, starting from, the pretty stupid code execution, as in, the script injections, and go into stuff like XSS and what else was there? There was, yeah. Anyway, so this is, again, this all assumes that basically the attacker could inject themselves into your templates, which is, if someone has access to your templates, you're probably screwed anyway. But nonetheless, it's quite interesting to see that this is considered to be like a real attack vector, and it still persists in Vue 3, but I guess this is sort of the way the Vue designed. I don't think the danger of this is too big because, again, this means that attacker first have to modify your templates, and then your templates have to be executed on the client. But the fact that this exists is, yeah, I mean, I guess interesting. Again, I don't think it's a super major, how would I put it? Super major issue for using Vue or the game stopper or whatever. Don't think so, but it's an interesting read nonetheless. There's some very curious obfuscation techniques that basically break the Vue templating completely, which is I guess most of them are, kind of what do you expect, but some of them are a bit silly. Anyway, if you are curious about the vulnerabilities in VueJS templating, do check this one out. It's actually a pretty good write-up. Right, let me have a look at the chat. I don't think it will be bad. Maybe there could be API the Go or Rust implementation could expose for customization. Yeah, I mean, so this is the problem with the native tooling, right? It's like in JavaScript, it's very easy to add plugins because it's a dynamic language and you can just require another module and there you go, there's your plugin, right? While Golang is purely statically compiled, so there is no way to make dynamic plugins at all unless you add interpreters. Or like, for example, there's Traffic, which is an amazing reverse proxy, right, which I use in quite a lot of my projects. It's written in Golang, it's extremely fast, and they recently added plugin system. The way they did it, they essentially added the Go interpreter, they packaged it inside of the Traffic itself. So you write plugins in Golang, and then they load this Golang, and they interpret the plugin on the runtime, which, you know, it works, but it is not as fast as the Golang would be. So it's kind of defeating the purpose here. I don't know about the situation with Rust and dynamic loading. I'm guessing there is some mechanisms to do that, but yeah, so this is like the plugins is definitely one of the things that is going to be a lot trickier to do in static languages or like the compiled languages rather than interpreted languages, right? But yeah, that's a fair point. Learning another language, oh no, it's fun if you got the time for it. That's a very valid point. Totally agree on that. Like, you know, if you're just doing this for your work, then obviously you might not want to learn another language. But the thing is that, like, if you're doing this for work, then you most often than not, you're just happy with whatever you got, right? So it's like very rarely you have cases where like you say, okay, I'm gonna go and extend this tool for our specific use case. Most of the time, you just either build your own tool for work or you just, I don't know, use whatever there is and say, okay, we can only do X, Y, Z, right? But yeah. I tried Next.js with a theme UI. This shit is amazing. Absolutely. Next.js is freaking fantastic, and I will not stop praising it. Okay, anyway, continuing, we are going to the tips, tricks, and bit-sized awesomeness section. We do have quite a few things here that are pretty cool. Starting with the first one that is not so cool. So there has been a Webpack 5 release that we're going to talk about a bit later on in the releases section. But essentially, it's a new version of Webpack, and since it's a major version, it does break quite a few things. And Mr. Cindersaurus here, who is quite prominent JavaScript developer and maintainer of literally hundreds of packages on NPM, all of them are pretty good. Complains basically about some of the changes that Webpack did with, well, not so great migration path. So the core complaint is that Webpack 4 used to polyfill Node.js API, right? Which means that you can just write your package for Node.js and then Webpack will polyfill API wherever it's possible. And your Node package will work seamlessly in a browser by just basically requiring it, right? This is no longer the case for Webpack 5. Essentially, it will not work. You have to manually include the polyfills, which means that whatever packages he did for Node.js will no longer work in browser with Webpack, which brings a whole bunch of different headaches. And there's an issue in Webpack for tracking that. There's like a lot of them actually. And yeah, it's like I mean, I guess I know why they did it, because that frees you, like, first of all, that you no longer include those polyfills by default, which means the bundle size is going to be a lot smaller and the execution time is going to be a lot faster. And that probably will work in like 95% of cases. But the other 5% of cases is, yeah, there's going to be, well, there's going to be some pain in basically addressing this. So basically, you know, you can manually, of course, include the polyfills because they have it as a separate package. But that is basically up to you, the maintainer of a Webpack configuration, I guess, and probably as well the maintainer of the modules if you publish the pre-built packages. And yeah, I can see how you can be disappointed in that change, because if you maintain hundreds of packages, that means you will have to update the configs for all of them to address this issue, and that does not sound like fun, to be honest. Anyway, continuing, we got pretty big write-up from Microsoft on progressive web apps for Xbox One. This is like the write-up itself is just a discussion of how you can actually build a progressive web app for Xbox. But the point here is that I didn't know Xbox One supported progressive web apps. So it turns out you can just take your progressive web app, you can just package it and publish it for the Xbox Store and serve it as a proper app on Xbox, which is kind of damn cool. So now you know, and if you're curious, there's like a whole guide here on how to do that, what to keep in mind, TV sizes, screens, and so on. TVJS, which is apparently a bunch of helper libraries that help you to interact with the TV buttons, the input, and so on and so forth. Like, this is kind of insane, and I'm really thinking about buying the new Xbox, like the Series X, because it looks really cool, and the Game Pass is one of the probably the best offers in gaming I've seen in consoles for a very long time. And maybe if I get one, we should probably do a stream and try to build an Xbox app for it. Like, that would be cool. That sounds like a very fun stream. But yeah, anyway, continuing, we got another thing from Microsoft. So turns out Microsoft is planning to unify Outlook across platforms using web technologies. So they had this, there was the Microsoft Ignite conference, and they had a pretty big talk, announced the evolution of Outlook, where they shared the future that they're basically have in mind for Outlook. And it's actually gonna be React app across all the platforms. So they're gonna use React or React Native or, well, other subsets of React to build the Outlook versions and publish them for, well, literally all the platforms out there, starting from desktop and go into Mac, universal platforms, as well as iOS and Android, which is pretty damn cool. Like, if you tried the Outlook recently, it is so damn snappy. I'm seriously thinking about migrating from Google Mail to Outlook, just because Google Mail is a sluggish piece of crap that, I mean, it's just infuriating how long it sometimes takes to load. Like, Outlook is just so damn fast in comparison. Like, it's just blowing my mind. It used to be it used to be the other way around, when Outlook used to be slow as hell, and then Gmail used to be very snappy and nice, and now it's like somehow the other way around. Like, I don't know how that works. The new Outlook on macOS is pretty sweet. I haven't actually tried the native apps in ages. Like, I'm, you might know, like, if you watch me constantly, you might know that I prefer the progressive web apps over everything else. So I typically just use the browser tabs for that. But I'm guessing since they're saying they're going to use React for everything, I'm guessing the desktop app is going to be some sort of a native UI, essentially the native, what do you call it? Like, probably not Electron, but something like Chromium, what do you call it? Chromium. What is the Chromium Spotify? God damn it. Spotify desktop framework. What is the framework they used? Chromium. Oh, man, my brain. Chromium embedded framework. This is what I'm trying to say. Ceph, right. So I'm guessing they're going to be using something like that because it's lighter than Electron, and they probably don't need the whole Electron thing. Have you looked at the React Native for Windows? Oh, yeah, that is a thing, right? So they might be using something like React Native for Windows, because they did. I remember, like, I know that it exists. I haven't tried it myself, but I remember reading that they released it for macOS as well. So maybe this is what they're going to be using for a desktop app. That is a very fair point. Like, this is probably going to work perfectly fine for all of their desktop apps. That is true. It's probably a lot lighter than Chromium Embedded Framework. Yeah, that's probably what they're going to do. But anyway, this is like, having someone as big as Microsoft backing React this much is really cool, because I don't know what's going to happen to Facebook in the next 5 to 10 years. Like, it doesn't, like, as much as they are still raking a lot of money, but they are prepping all over the privacy, and there's more and more, like, legislations around that. And there's more and more governments looking at this, and I have a feeling Facebook is not going to survive too long if they keep doing that. But having someone like Microsoft backing React and saying, hey, we're going to use that is really cool, because in the end, maybe we'll get a Microsoft-backed React fork or something, which is sounds ridiculous, I know, but that's a possibility in my opinion. But anyway, this is, I think, really, really cool. Continuing, we got next thing. The tiny thing here is titled the --var spacebar semicolon hack to toggle multiple values with one custom property. So this is a CSS trick, or I guess the CSS vars trick, that basically allows you to toggle multiple properties with one variable. And the idea is that the var function in CSS actually evaluates okay, how do I explain it? So you can set the CSS variables, right? You typically set it to some whatever value, and then you can use it with var function, which falls back from specific variable to other default value if variable is not set. So the thing is that if you already defined a variable, it's considered to be set, so it doesn't work on these fallbacks, right? Well, the thing is that you can actually just define a variable with a white space, which is actually significant, or turns out it's significant. I didn't know that this is the way it works. And this var thing will be evaluated to actually nothing if you set it to this way, right? And it will fall back to whatever you have after it, which effectively makes it a toggle. There's obvious limitations for that, but yeah, it's a really nice little trick. And if you're using CSS a lot and you want to toggle some features, check this out. It seems like a pretty handy rule that I probably explained in a terrible way. Anyway, it's not that long. Just give it a read yourself and check it out because it's a really neat trick. Okay, next thing we got here is announcement of Ionic Vue. So the Ionic framework now works with Vue, and it shipped with Vue 3 under the hood, which is super nice. Again, you know, Ionic is this mobile app framework that is sort of the blend of progressive web apps with native components, which seems to be sort of the, what do you call it? Successor of Apache Cordova, or I guess a more modern version of that. And yeah, I've heard good things about it. So if you don't have an extremely complicated use case and you don't need some native performance, this usually works perfectly fine, and it's amazingly easy to use as long as you are basically a web developer. So if you wanted to do this with Vue, do check it out. This is actually pretty damn cool. And apparently they can also now target Electron and progressive web apps. That is, I didn't know that this was a thing. So you can actually build mobile app and desktop app and a progressive web app all with their tooling. That is kind of cool. Okay, maybe we should do a deep dive into that. That sounds like a nice, pretty nice tooling. And they already have a library of over 100 mobile UI components. I wonder how they scale those to the desktop and progressive web apps. That will be very interesting to see. Used Ionic with Angular for iOS. Yeah, I mean, I don't remember if I streamed it, but I did use one of the early versions of Ionic with, what did they have? They have Angular, they have React, and they have, I think they had their own thing back then. So it was the fork of Cordova, basically. It worked fine. Yeah, it wasn't like, you know, it's obviously like obvious web experience, which was okay-ish, especially on older phones, but it was pretty cool. So it's really nice to see them develop it. Long live Vue. Well, Vue is an amazing framework. I already said that. I will say that more than once. It's really great, and for some use cases, I will still prefer it over everything else. Anyway, continuing, we got the last tiny bit here that is titled Creating TypeScript Declarations from JavaScript and JSDoc, and it's a tiny tutorial that shows you how to use TypeScript to generate the TypeScript definitions from your existing JavaScript code. I personally did not know that was a thing, and that's honestly amazing. You literally just install the TypeScript, you define a very basic config, and it literally emits the declarations for TypeScript from your existing JSDoc, which is really damn cool. So if you're writing JavaScript and you wanted to publish your library for TypeScript users and allow them to use it without any additional type definitions, then you can just do that, which seems to be pretty damn easy to do. Again, this assumes that you actually have the JSDoc declarations in your code, which might not be the case for some people. But anyway, that's it for the tips, tricks, and bit-sized awesomeness. Now we are coming to the releases, and we do have some very, very big things this week. As I said before, the first major release of the week is Webpack 5, which brings a whole ton of things. There's, again, since it's a major version, there are breaking features, basically, breaking changes is what I'm trying to say. Breaking features? No. Breaking changes that are gonna impact your build, so it's not an easy migration from Webpack 4. And so there's a sentence here that, for whatever reason, a lot of people on Hacker News and Reddit picked on, which just makes my blood boil, which is just ridiculous. So the sentence is as follows: Webpack 5 is released, but that doesn't mean it's done, bug-free, or even feature complete. As with Webpack 4, we continue development by fixing problems or adding features. This was one thing, and the other thing was that saying that basically, you know, try to upgrade, you might want to upgrade once or twice. And people read it as in like, hey, you know, Webpack is garbage. Why do they say to upgrade once or twice? Why is it like its JavaScript ecosystem is bad? This is not what they're saying. Like, listen, I get it. You want to pick on JavaScript. Fine, you can hate on JavaScript all you want. But those people worked on this product for years, and it's amazing. Like, the quality of the code is just insane. If you ever try to look through the code base, it's really easy to read. What they're saying here is not that the Webpack is garbage and you will have to npm install twice or thrice or whatever to make it work. No. What they're saying is Webpack ecosystem is so damn big that all the plugins that you use might not work with the new version because of the API surface. Like, come on, it's not that hard to understand. It's just so painful to read those comments. I freaking hate it. Anyway, yeah, so coming back to the Webpack itself. Yes, so the support, like, this is the problem with it, right? So this is sort of the advantage of it and the problem at the same time. Webpack has support for a ton of different combinations. Not just that, it also has support for a billion of different plugins that are written by third-party developers. And even though there's a new version of Webpack, there's no guarantee that all the existing plugins that you use will work with it. Like, come on. This thing is so complicated, it's basically a whole ecosystem that lives on its own right now, right? And of course, if you're not using it, if you've never worked with Webpack, if you're not doing JavaScript, you will not know that, and it's a very easy thing to pick on, but it's just infuriating in my opinion. Anyway, coming back to the Webpack itself, the basic improvements here are improved build performance because they now use persistent caching. They now have improved long-term caching with better algorithms and defaults. There's now improved bundle size with better tree shaking and code gen, and improved compatibility with the web platform, as well as a bunch of other minor things. Another major thing for in terms of features is the modules federation, which I think we already talked about before. So basically the gist is that you can now use or I guess unify multiple different builds into one Webpack config that would execute them separately and then merge it into one final build, which sounds incredibly powerful, but boy, do I not want to maintain a config like that. Anyway, if you are interested in this stuff, do check out the release notes. Again, they are really extensive. There is a whole ton of things. There's a very big migration guide, a very detailed description of all the breaking changes. Incredible work on the documenting all of that. Again, you know, huge props to the team behind this. There was some crazy work gone into this, and man, I really don't want to read comments that saying, hey, it's still broken because it's JavaScript ecosystem. No. Don't even dare saying that. It actually already works. Like, if you take Next.js, they already use Webpack 5 and it works amazingly well. So there you go. Okay, let me have a look at the chat. Let the Create React team work it. Yeah, that's my approach as well. Let the Create React app or Next.js team work it out and just use the final tooling. I'm really glad I don't have to maintain the Webpack config myself anymore, because that is a lot of work. Like, you literally probably, like in 2020, if you are building the custom Webpack config, you probably have to have a separate person that is responsible for that on your team because it is that complex. Going from Webpack 3 to 4 wasn't too bad. Error messages were very useful. Yeah, I mean, the migration the migration path they have is very straightforward. It's just really, really complex. That's the problem. Like, there's no, it's not broken, it's not problematic, it's not hard, is just complex, and it probably will take you a lot of time to iron out all the errors you get. But yeah, I mean, I think we'll never get rid of people who just keep hating on JavaScript because it's JavaScript. Like, they did promise to make it less complex. Well, I mean, the migration guide here is insane. Like, it's really detailed. All the features are very well described. All the major changes are super detailed. This is probably one of the most detailed changelogs I've seen in years for a tool. But anyway, continuing. We got NPM CLI version 7.0. Finally, we got new version of NPM. Has been in development for past 2 years? ? I think maybe less, maybe more. I don't honestly remember. I remember reading about the fact that they started working on NPM 7. I think it was like pre-GitHub acquisition for sure. Maybe even before that. And now we finally got it here. So if I remember correctly, it still is not tagged as latest stable. Basically, you have to explicitly install it with npm install npm 7. It will be shipped with Node 15, which is coming out next week. Which is, yeah, basically something I'm quite excited about. And exciting new features are basically workspaces. So we now have the workspaces support in npm. You no longer need yarn or pnpm or, well, any other npm fork or npm alternative is a better word to do that. The new so there's basically completely rewritten from scratch algorithm of dependency resolution that is supposed to be better, faster, based on, this is basically the new model arborist that is the core of the npm. And yeah, it now installs peer dependencies automatically, which is honestly a feature that I welcome quite wholeheartedly, because it always seemed weird to me that peer dependencies did not install automatically, even though, you kind of need them anyway. Like, why would you not install them out of the box? Anyway, so peer dependencies install automatically. This is a thing to keep in mind, because normally it shouldn't break anything, but if you have some very special use case, I guess, where it might break things, keep that in mind. There's also package log v2, so the new package log that is now deterministic and allows you to do deterministic reproducible builds, which is amazing because previous npm had problems with that. And it now supports yarn log, so you can actually use yarn log if you have one to run npm over that, which is kind of great. There's also a bunch of breaking changes, mostly related to the APIs and npx rewrites. I'm kind of curious to read more about that. I haven't had time to dive into that, but yeah. So we are going to see how that develops. I'm waiting for Node 15 and npm 7 to become basically latest stable, so I can try them out. And I'm planning to migrate a couple of my own tools from, or I guess first test if npm is actually on par or faster than Yarn. Like, I don't know, because Yarn has been acting really weird for me lately, and I'm basically looking to migrate back to npm purely in hopes it's going to be more stable. So there we go. Anything interesting coming in Node 15? Well, one thing I'm interested in is, the version, the V8 version that is updated, because there's like a ton of new features, including some awesome features that I'm looking forward to. Other than that, I honestly don't remember if there's anything like anything other super significant. I don't remember, like, on top of my head. So I think the most so we got npm. Yeah, so basically the most awaited feature for me is V8 update with a bunch of new JavaScript features, essentially. So there you go. Right, continuing, we got Cypress. So actually, I linked to the version 5.4.0, but there's actually also version 5.3.0, which was released the same week. So 5.3.0 makes Firefox support is no longer in beta. It's now stable, and you can use it with Cypress. It works amazingly well. So if you're doing end-to-end testing and you need to test against Firefox, this is now the tool to use, in my opinion. And the 5.4.0 adds a way to prune cache, and additionally, while my favorite feature is video recordings now have chapters. So basically, if your video player supports chapters, you can actually jump in video between each test as a chapter immediately, which is extremely handy. So again, if you're using Cypress, do check it out. It's a super handy feature. There's also a bunch of other minor things like, the side viewport support for different iPhones and a bunch of other presets. Okay, that's it for the Cypress. Now we got Tailwind CSS version 1.9.0, which allows you to, so what is the highlights here? I honestly don't remember. Remembering about that when it came out, and then I completely forget everything. Oh yes, so it basically adds the new presets key to the Tailwind config, which basically allows you to base your theme on existing presets, which is super handy, because before that, it was kind of hard to create your own themes and reuse configs. But now it's basically using presets. You can share the configs across your company projects or whatever, which is super cool. And yeah, I think other things are not as notable, but yeah, again, still I am I think Tailwind is a godsend CSS framework, especially for someone like me who has no idea how CSS works. Because it just makes so easy to style things in your front end is just incredible. And yeah, having those features is super cool. Okay, and the last thing we got here is Babel version 7.12 that adds support for TypeScript 4.1 and strings as import-export names and classic static blocks. Most of that is pretty self-descriptive. I think the import-export string names is a painful feature, especially considering the examples they give. You can now export things as emojis. Please don't do that. This looks terrible, to be honest, but not, yes, I mean, essentially you can use strings as export names now. I don't know what the use cases for this are, but I guess they exist. I mean, otherwise there wouldn't be a thing, right? So there you go. Okay. That's it for releases. Now we're coming to the Libs and demos. We don't really have that many of them here today. The first one being HTML-CSS-Tutorial. So this is a pretty nice short-ish tutorial that is very basic. So this is like if you have any friends who want to learn HTML and CSS, this is actually a really good intro. So just send them this repo, and if they go through it, they will at least be able to create a very basic HTML page with some CSS styling. So that that's literally all it is. Let me have a look at the chats. I love Tailwind. Absolutely love Tailwind as well. Tailwind is great, but I use Chakra UI, which is based upon it, but uses emotion. Oh, interesting. I don't remember if I heard about Chakra UI. Chakra UI, let me have a look. That looks a lot like Tailwind. Okay, so, right. Okay, does it allow you to use the actual, like, Tailwind classes? Like, this looks nice, but the cool thing about Tailwind is the fact that you can quickly use Tailwind classes to style whatever you want according to your design that you get from the design team, right? And this seems like it's basically pre-designed, which, again, you know, it has its use cases, obviously, but it's not as flexible as a Tailwind itself. I think we had it in BxJS Weekly at some point. Gonna use emojis all the time now, submitting PRs. Oh no, you evil person. Oh no. No, his design system is based on theirs. It's very easy to overstand. Okay, so it's basically you get the predefined style and you have to tweak it. Like, this is the thing about the Tailwind, is basically you don't have the pre-designed style and you can just build whatever you want. This is what makes it so powerful, and this is why I really love working with it. Because if you have some very specific components, you can just build them out from classes in place without having to redesign the core or whatever, you know. And this is, I think, this what basically sold me on it. Very flexible compared to the other libraries like Material. I think, like, if it's based on Tailwind, or Tailwind, somebody needs to make a Tailwind framework now. Yeah, if it's based on Tailwind, then I'm not surprised it's flexible. Like, yeah, this seems like a lot like a Tailwind config, basically. But again, you know, I guess it's just different use cases, basically. Anyway, continuing, next thing we got here is charts. This is an ASCII chart port to Deno. So if you're using Deno and you wanted to do the fancy console ASCII charts, you can now do that. Nothing super... You know, it's not too different from ASCII charts, basically just a port for Deno and TypeScript. Seems to be working perfectly fine. Fork Tailwind and rename it. Do you want me to fork it and just rename it as Tailwind and never update, right? So it should be Tailwind, and it's like one of the older versions of Tailwind that is never updated. That's a terrible idea. Anyway, continuing, we got self-edit. Seriously hacky editor for text. So, yeah, this one is, I don't even know how to describe it. So the idea is that it's a URL that includes the source code for editor, as well as the data for whatever you edited this, right? And then if you copy and paste it, it will actually be the exact editor that you've changed. Which is like, it's a bit crazy, but yes, there's like the source code here, the actual source code that is then gets encoded into this base64 URL. And it's a really nice case study that shows you how crazy the URLs can be. But yeah, it's basically, you know, if you copy that, paste it here, run it, there you go, there's your editor. It actually supports Markdown, so you can you can, do anything you want here. And there's the heading, there's the lists, there's whatever the hell you want. And it literally changes the URL, and you can... no, what did I do? Oh, no, I broke it, I think. Yep. And then you can copy it, and if you paste it, it's going to be your changed thing, which is like, again, this thing is bonkers. If you're curious as to how it was made, have a look at the self-edit HTML, and you will basically find out. Okay, continue. We got Luckysheet. This is an online spreadsheet like Excel that is powerful, simple to configure, and completely open source. So essentially the JavaScript reimplementation of spreadsheets with a whole ton of features. Like the amount of features is quite mind-blowing, including undo, redo, and all that kind of stuff, and a ton of formulas, charts, pivot tables, whatever you can imagine. It's most likely here. So if you were looking for something like that, do check it out. It actually looks quite nice. Next thing we got here is the tech GPU. A super tiny library that basically allows you to classify GPU based on their 3D rendering benchmark score, allowing you to figure out what kind of features you will progressively enable to retain the nice performance. Yeah, again, this probably has a very limited use cases, but it's kind of nice that it exists. Basically allows you to determine the performance of the user's machine and figure out if you want to load some fancy animations or WebGL stuff or not. And also tells you if you're running on a mobile GPU or not, which is, again, it's probably very limited use cases, but kind of cool that it exists. Okay. Next thing we got here is Architect, a simplest, most powerful way to build serverless application. So this is another serverless framework that is completely open source and allows you to build serverless apps in a pretty straightforward way, actually. So this is like one of the simpler frameworks I've seen out there, because those serverless frameworks tend to be incredibly complicated, and it's always really hard to say what the hell is going on. This one is very nicely designed, has very nice docs, and seems to be very easy to use. So if you're interested in serverless, do check this one out. Maybe this is exactly what you were looking for. Right, next thing we got here is essentia.js. This is a JavaScript library for music and audio analysis and processing powered by WebAssembly. So essentially it's a DSP library that is compiled from C and C++ into WebAssembly, and you can just use it to do the DSP. Yeah, and there's like a whole ton of things and a whole ton of different features that it has. It seems incredibly powerful for, again, something that you would have in a browser, and it's kind of cool. Have you tried Pulumi? I think I've heard about it. I mean, I'm not that much into serverless myself. Okay, yeah, I remember reading about it, but I have not tried it. So I typically go for Terraform, which is similar to Pulumi as far as I understand. AWS CDK, Amazon Web Services CDK. So this is something that I have not... Right, I remember reading about that, but I basically opted for Terraform because it was essentially platform agnostic and allowed me to scaffold not just on not just on Amazon, but if we needed to, like Google Cloud or whatever. So yeah. Is Emscripten still a thing? Yes, Emscripten is still very much a thing. It still is used quite heavily for, I mean, this basically it's evolved from compiling C, C++ into the awesomeness to WebAssembly, and now it's essentially you can just use it to compile stuff to WebAssembly, right? So the new awesome. No, Terraform is declarative. You don't write the actual code. With Pulumi and AWS CDK, you write TypeScript. But, I mean, it's like, do you really need to write code to describe your infrastructure? That's the question. Like, I looked at the Pulumi and I seen like, yeah, okay, you can write it in TypeScript, JavaScript, Golang, whatever, Python. But why? Like, because Terraform, in my opinion, does, well, maybe not maybe our case is not complex enough, but it does like 99% of things you want to do. And different way of thinking about things. Maybe, but you know, I don't know. Like I personally think Terraform is perfectly fine enough, and I actually like declarative way of defining your infrastructure more than code because it's just easier to reason about. Maybe I just haven't used Pulumi and it just didn't click for me. Maybe this is why I'm saying that. Maybe Pulumi actually makes more sense, or the infrastructure as code makes more sense than declarative, I guess, config declarations or something like that. The Terraform does, but again, Terraform is not strictly declare, like it's still, you still can code some stuff, right? So there's still like operations that you can execute optionally and so on and so forth. Terraform is awesome. Yes, Terraform is absolutely awesome, and I don't know if I would ever use Amazon Web Services without Terraform, because I find the Amazon Web Services UI to be abysmal, and I have no idea how anyone can work with this stuff without Terraform. Been trying to decide what path to go down, iOS dev or backend dev. Like, pick whatever you like more. Don't decide on market, because this is something you're going to be doing for next 10, 20 years. Right? Do you really want to get stuck with whatever market dictates right now? Or do you want to learn something that you enjoy, become an expert in it, and just keep working for, rest of your life, basically? Don't decide on the market, please. Just pick whatever you enjoy more. Anyway, continuing, the last thing we got here is unfortunately not open source as far as I can tell, but it's a WebGL sculpting tool that works in your browser that is really damn impressive. It's a real shame it's not open source, but this is like a full-on sculpting tool in the browser that you can just, use, and there's like brushes and different things that you can do and textures, and it's just insane. I never thought you could do something like this in a browser, which is just crazy. And yeah. Just give it a shot. Again, super unfortunate that it's not open source, but maybe the author will open source it at some point. But it is a really, really cool demo of what you can do nowadays with WebGL and a browser. What am I creating? I have no idea what am I creating. This looks terrible. I am not, I am terrible in all ways of, artistic tools, and yeah. Stanford released 2020 lectures on Swift using MVVC. I mean, Swift is a really cool language. I haven't used it too much, but my experience with it was quite positive. Like, especially after, like, I still remember the dread and pain of using Objective-C to code iOS apps back in 2009 or whatever was it. That was like, Objective-C is just a painful language. I never want to touch it again. Swift is a lot better in that way. Hey Mihail, welcome to the stream. In the previous video about stencil, you should have done base URL dots for serve to work. Oh, I see. Okay, thank you for the notes. That's I should try it next time. So basically, the thing is that I've been getting some comments, people saying that, hey, you did a stream on web components, but stencil is not really web components. So I'm thinking about doing another stream and just doing the repeating the web app we built with stencil, but doing it without using any framework. So just plain vanilla JavaScript without actually using any bundlers at all. So we're gonna try and do that and see how can you actually build stuff for web in 2020 without bundlers, with just ES modules, web components, and some vanilla JavaScript, and we'll see how far this will get us and how good the experience is compared to using a full-fledged framework, and how much will we suffer. I don't know what I'm doing this. I'm just digging a hole in it basically at this point. I think you can put at least 5K for this piece of art. Do you want to buy one? I mean, I can just I can 3D print it. There you go. So we can export it. This is also a really cool feature actually. You can export this thing into why yes. Oh, it's creating zip. So you can literally export this 3D model and open a website that will 3D print it for you. Looks like something from Doom. Well, thank you. You know what? Like, Doom has a really good designs for monsters. I don't think I'm quite as good as that, but yeah, sure. Why not? Oh my God, what am I? Oh, actually show faces. Okay, cool. Anyway, that was sculptgl. This is all for Libs and demos. Last thing I got here for today is this super cool research project from EU-funded I guess it's a university or sort of, yeah, I mean, anyway, it's a EU funded website / demo that is titled How Normal I Am. And it's a really cool walkthrough that basically shows you, first of all, it shows you what the AI, or I guess machine learning algorithms, the modern one, can deduce from just looking at you through your web camera or just looking at you as a photo. And second of all, it shows you how much machine learning you can run in a modern browser, because all the things that it shows you and it does to you, it actually does in the browser window right there in place and doesn't actually share anything with any third parties. If you have a webcam, I would encourage you to just go on this website, agree to the terms, start the show, and see what it tells you about you, because it's absolutely fascinating. But yeah, that's basically all I have to say about that. If you want to try it, give it a shot. Again, it's a really, really cool demo. Okay. That's actually it from my side. So if you guys have any questions or suggestions, now is the time to throw them into the chat. Again, as usual, you can find all the links on BxJS.dev website or on GitHub. The link is in the description. If you have any questions, suggestions, now is the time to throw them into the chat, or you can leave them as a comment to the video on YouTube. The VOD will be available immediately after the stream. You can join our Discord if you want to chat about any of that, if we are no longer live, or you just want to talk about JavaScript, get any help, or talk about video games as well. We do that sometimes. You can follow me on Twitter for some retweets of JavaScript stuff or my shitposting, and I guess that about covers it. Oh yeah, there is a Telegram channel where I collect all the links over the week, because some of them don't really make it to the podcast because I filter them out. So if you're interested in unfiltered stream, do follow that. And yeah, that's basically it. How about some more Docker stuff or infra in general? I guess we could do that. Like, we could probably do a Terraform Docker exoframe video showing how to quickly set up a VM or something like this, or like a set of VMs and deploy stuff on them. Because I probably need to write, like, the thing is, I have my own like demo server where I publish stuff to, right? And occasionally I just migrate from one hoster to another because it becomes cheaper. And every time I have to do it manually, it just annoys me to no extent. So probably at this point I should write some sort of a Terraform or Ansible script or something that would do it for me. So that might be a good idea. So maybe at some point we'll do that. Are you using ECS? No, I'm not using Amazon myself because it's just expensive. Like, in my opinion, Amazon Web Services are way more expensive than just about any other hosting platform you can get, unless you optimize specifically for it, which in my case is not the case. Right now, I'm hosting myself at Hetzner and Hetzner.de, please. Because it's literally like if you go for their cloud offerings, you can get, so I'm paying $5, 60, so, okay, €6 essentially for 4 gigs of RAM, 40 gigs of NVMe SSD, and 2 virtual CPUs, which is more than enough for my like 10 demos that I'm running. So I don't want to pay more for Amazon Web Services. I don't want to calculate my traffic load or whatever. I just want to pay like fixed $6 per month and just forget about it, basically. And with these prices, I mean, especially because I don't care much about regions or any other stuff, because my demos are not sensitive to that stuff, I just host in Germany and that's fine for me. This is like the perfect offering. So yeah. If you're not, yeah, that's the thing, right? So Amazon Web Services, in my opinion, makes sense only if you tailor your product around their offerings, such as, I don't know, SQS, mail services, or whatever. So yeah, I basically just, I don't use any of that right now. So it's like my demos work perfectly fine on a tiny VM. Hey Donna, welcome to the stream. We are unfortunately already wrapping up. See if you don't have that. Okay, yeah. So like if you don't need regions, you don't really need stuff like Amazon Web Services. You don't need stuff like Cloudflare. You don't need content delivery networks, because in my case, demos are very small, very static. Like I have my amazing website that is literally just one index HTML. Like I don't need Amazon to serve that. It's just like, it's perfectly fine to have a crappy VM doing this. Anyway, any more questions, suggestions, or things you want to ask, guys? GDPR, US Shield. Oh yeah, no, I mean, I don't have any cookies here. Like, that's the thing. I don't want to conform to GDPR or whatever. It's just too much pain in the ass. So I just don't insert any tracking cookies or whatever, right? So I can collect anonymous logging from my server because that is perfectly compliant with GDPR and you don't need consent for that. I'm fine with that. I don't really care knowing about my demography and, you know, who looks at my crappy 3 lines of text on my website. It's like, I'm okay without doing that. Okay, I'll give you a couple more minutes to ask any questions or, you know, throw in your demos if you have any. If not, let's just wrap it up here and go have an awesome rest of the weekend. And I guess I want to eat something because I'm getting a bit pecky. Right. Doesn't seem like we have any more questions or suggestions. So thank you guys very much for watching. Thank you for your continued support. Hope you enjoyed the podcast. Again, join our Discord if you want to discuss any of that or share your own libraries. We'll be more than happy to cover them here. Yeah, that's basically it from my side. Thank you very much for watching. Have an awesome rest of the weekend or rest of the week if you're watching the VOD of this. And I see you on Wednesday for a vanilla JavaScript ES modules web component stream.